BMW M3 G80, the all-new model, versus the M3 E30, the very first M3. Tom is joining you here together
with AJ, and two important questions that we want to answer. Of course, we know the M3 has come a long way, but what do we wish had remained the same, but what are we glad has actually changed for the better?
So exterior, interior and driving experience of both vehicles. And at the end of the video, we want to decide which of these cars do we want to take home right here today. Really looking forward to the result. I mean, any car enthusiast will enjoy this episode. Just take a look at these two vehicles. It's going to be a blast. This very first M3 generation, built from 1986. That's my age group exactly, up to 1990. So this car is essentially me, you know. I think it has aged very, very well. Look at that, the very vehicle here from 87, by the way. Round headlamps, this is the daytime running light, by the way. And now very interesting, look at that front grille. It's longer in the vertical way than it is in the horizontal. And that we can also see here on the new M3.
But of course, I think the new M3 is so much more fussy. It's its design. There's so many creases and angles and shapes. But the front of the E30 is so simple, straight lines. Even this little brow on the top of the headlamps adds that tiny tinge of menace. I mean, these wheels, if you look at the old car and the new car, the design is quite similar, but this is just 15 inches. The new one, you have 20 in the back and 19 in the front.
It's really incredible. They are so tiny in comparison to the cars nowadays, but I think to the overall design of the vehicle, they are just right sized. I mean, this angular design is the same way here in the side profile. And of course, one of the biggest differences between the two vehicles is weight. 1.3 tons versus 1.7 tons. So 400 kilograms or 880 pounds difference. This will be, of course, having a massive effect on driving. The fuel tank here, by the way, 70 liters instead of 62 liters, so 8 liters more if you compare it to the normal 3 Series E30. Quite obvious because it consumes so much more fuel.
I really like the spoiler. For me, a sports car, especially an 80s sports car, has to have a spoiler.
I'm not sure. It's very, very obvious. It does fit to the vehicle, you know, very well integrated, yes. But is it maybe a little bit too much? And also, have you seen this edge there? Maybe you can show it right there. This one. This looks a little bit odd, right? And clearly, no job at all for the Autogefühl fake exhaust police today, because this is clearly the real deal. And yeah, Jonas, of course, cameraman Jonas, doing the magic today once again. There was this, you know, the shot from this angle there. It was so sexy. Can you show it again? There it is. So the length difference here about 44 centimeters or 13 inches. This one here longer at 4 meters 80 or 189 inches. The chassis-wise direct comparison would nowadays be the M4, but we still want to do M3 versus M3. That's just cooler. In the second generation, that's where the sedan was firstly available also for the M3. Well, clearly the number of exhaust tips they have doubled here in the new generation. Really super massive in the lower area, carbon fiber use. But the spoiler lip is definitely more subtle.
I really like the spoiler in the old one, but I do prefer these tail lamps compared to the old ones. They're sleeker. I think the old ones are a bit too boxy and big.
And now it's time to listen to the sound. Where does that sound come from? Here, the 3-liter inline 6 bi-turbo, 480 horsepower or 510 horsepower here in the competition version. This one always comes with automatic gearbox, and you can also get all-wheel drive. However, that's not exactly the purest choice.
No, absolutely. I would definitely take the standard version, even with 480 horsepower, that's plenty, but you get a 6-speed manual and rear-wheel drive with a limited slip differential. This S58 engine is one of my favorites on sale today. It's got so much character, it's so energetic.
And now, some famous vehicles like the Jaguar E-Type, for example, have reversely opening bonnets, and also the same case here for the E30. Woo, let's go.
Oh yeah, I love a clamshell bonnet. So inside we don't have a 6-cylinder inline engine, instead we have a 4-cylinder engine. but 2.3 liters, and it still makes 195 horsepower. That comes mated in this case with a 5-speed manual transmission and rear-wheel drive. But 2.3 liters, 195 horsepower, this could go up to 235 kilometers per hour, or about 146 miles per hour. And back in 1985, I think that was pretty fast.
Found something AJ will love, I promise you. I'm hitting the throttle right now, and then look at that.
Well, look at that. Thanks to Thomas. You can see here we have a cable-operated throttle, just really analog. And you can also notice that the actual cylinder banks are tilted to one side. Now BMW claims that this makes the engine run smoother, but also it enables them to mount the engine lower and have a lower center of gravity.
Actually, my grandparents owned a BMW E30 in white. Not an M3, my granny was not a racing driver. But one thing I really remember, and I mean, bringing so many memories back, just listen to that sound already when I open the door. Just this sound, did you hear that? One more. This plop sound, and then of course the door closing sound as well. It sounds so classic, so awesome, and when I hear this sound, I'm immediately 25 years younger or even more. And look at that interior, slim door, and what I really like best is the slim steering wheel. It, just gives you the feeling this is all manual and purist. You have the steering wheel, analog instruments, 3 pedals, manual drive, and that's it. You get in the vehicle and you start driving.
Get in the vehicle and start driving. You don't need to tell me anything else, Thomas. Let's take a look at this old dashboard. I mean, manual controls, real knobs, real buttons. Oh, feels so good to touch them. I'm kind of missing these things with all the touchscreens in modern cars. And look at this. How cool is that? You have little storage compartments to store your cassette decks. The seating position is fantastic. Again, thanks to that low belt line, the dash is low and you have really tall windows, so great visibility.
Well, AJ, when you're driving with your girlfriend, I won't be joining you here in the rear. I mean, it hardly works, but it's really something more for 2 people, this first generation. One of the most fun things also with the vintage vehicles, using the vintage keys and opening the trunk like this, central locking, and then manually opening like this. This is so cool. Here, look at that, and this is really different. I mean, so wide. This is really amazing. You can put a lot of things in here. Just you really have to put things in like this, like a top-loader washing machine. And of course, another favorite of mine is the trunk closing sound. Listen to that. Isn't that awesome? Now the new M3 interior. Look at that. These bucket seats here, you can get them optionally or here in the competition package. Usually they would look a little bit more normal and sporty. I mean, it's no comparison at all if you look at the old one and the new one. So exterior-wise, what would I have kept from the old vehicle is that angular design on the exterior. I just love that. Here on the interior, one thing I would have kept is the simplicity of the interior. This one here is very well done, but I think all the options you have here also make driving a little bit more complicated. You have M1, M2 button on the steering wheel. Then you have here the M mode, setup, exhaust button. You can fine-tune everything, also how the transmission works and so on, especially in here with the automatic gearbox. So on the one hand, it's good to be able to control a lot of things. On the other hand, maybe a little bit over-engineered to me. Yay! Welcome to the E30, this very first M3, and of course, I mean, it's really an awesome experience. The steering here is very wake, so that's a huge difference to nowadays vehicle. This there's so much play, hardly any resistance, but I just love this purest manual feeling, thin steering wheel, and the gearbox. I mean, it is also somewhat wake in some areas, but I think it's super cool just to have this unfiltered experience. How is it as a co-driver?
Well, first of all, I love the space in here. It seems really compact on the outside, but because of the thin doors and the really minimal dashboard and lack of airbags or any of that kind of sound deadening kind of stuff.
I found it really peculiar that we have the first gear like in the back left,
Yeah.
you know, and then
This is called a dogleg gearbox, and that's because you have 2 and 3 right in one line, and it's kind of designed to be like a track car because you're usually between second and third gear on a racetrack, so it's really easy to just go up and down and change between second and third, and you never use first gear in a racetrack. It's just to get the car rolling. So, but you got to remember you don't accidentally put it in reverse and smash into the car behind you at a traffic light.
yeah, I mean that's really cool. I mean, like I like to switch from second to third, and also like just in the city and so on. And that's really cool. And for me, like really funny is at that point this car was super sporty and it went so fast and so quick at the same time in the acceleration. But nowadays, this rather feels like a comfortable vehicle, and any Golf GTI or something would be so much sportier, you know, of course in a nowadays sense. And this car is still very capable, but this is, this has come such a long way.
But tell me more about this engine. How does it respond? It's a 4-cylinder manual throttle cable. How does that feel?
Yeah, I really love this purest linear feeling. The clutch has a lot of resistance. So, I mean, recently had some of the new vehicles like the Hyundai Tucson, where I had like the least responsive clutch ever. And now this is like a super responsive clutch, So you have a good feeling when you lift your foot off the clutch, and it comes really towards you, and you immediately feel one with the vehicle, And that's also the reason why you would still go manual. You have the feeling in your foot. You have here on your right hand, so everything is totally in your control, and you can really finely tune and play with throttle and the clutch, and that's also where this car comes alive. When you cruise it a little bit, it's maybe like, oh, we're on the Sunday cruise, but then when you're going up in the revs, that's where this car is really fun. And yeah. Yeah, no, it wasn't.
Now you're gonna, I saw that.
With the
I
second
saw
one,
that. Takes a little bit of getting used to. But I think that's the point. You live with this for a couple days and you get the hang of that gearbox.
Yeah.
But let's put your foot on it. Come on.
Yeah, okay. Now we can accelerate
go a little bit faster.
more. Let's put back to second gear and let's go. Woo!
The engine sounds pretty nice.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's really cool. I mean, when you really rev it out, totally adrenaline rush, even though it's not super powerful in comparison to nowadays cars, but of course there's not the same sound dampening and so on. But I have to say, I mean, now we're driving 70 kilometers an hour, there's not too much wind noises, so I think it's also, they improved the aerodynamics here for the E30 M version in comparison to the normal 3 Series, but I think acoustic wise it's actually quite fine, so very interesting. So
are you lost in the gears again?
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, that's the thing, but that's also the fun thing about it. Not everything has to be perfect. So, I mean, for me, this is so enjoyable and it brings so many memories. Back then, I was on the back seat in the E30 and watching my grandparents drive, and being able to drive this one now myself is really a dream come true for me. And man, I think I really have to get one of these.
I stepped on the brake a little bit with my left foot. Oh, I feel like I'm in the 80s and I'm driving a race car. Visibility is fantastic, and you look out the back, you see that big orange wing.
That's awesome. Yeah.
It's awesome, right? It's totally awesome.
Oh man, AJ.
But the steering is, like I said, there's a lot of play in the middle, and it's not a fast rack. Like in modern sports cars, you have a really fast rack, improves the feeling of agility, but it handles itself really well around corners. The pedal box is a bit narrow, but the good news is once you realize not to step on the brake with your left foot when you're pressing the clutch, it's really easy to heel toe like that. And yeah, the gearbox, and this is one thing I always notice with BMW gearboxes, is I don't get that very nice solid clunk, like some of these Japanese gearboxes. When I drove the 2002 or the 2002 Tii, or when I drove the Z3, so kind of all the eras, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, this seems to be a prevailing characteristic of BMW gearboxes. It's not a very gated feel, but it's still really fun to drive. But I think overall, like you said, it's not a fast car. It's sporty. It's not about speed, it's just about the sensation of speed. You know, the analog controls, the sound of the engine, the vibrations, the smells. It's just about the sensations.
Yeah, I think this one here, it feels faster than it actually is, and the new one is faster than it actually feels. That's what you think. And yeah, I just want to say, oh man, AJ, this might be a very expensive day for me. I'm not sure if I can get out of this vehicle without just like, you know, asking the guys at BMW Classic, like, do you have one for me or something?
Did you bring your checkbook?
Yeah. Oh God, I shouldn't have done this review.
All right, now in the new M3, first of all, there's light years of difference between the old one and the new one. The engine, the steering, the chassis, it's so much more agile. It's so much more faster. I mean, 510 horsepower compared to what was it, 195? There's no comparison. It's more than twice the amount.
I mean, it feels relaxed in a way, more relaxed in the seats.
Okay. In the old one, you mean?
No, here. I mean, it's like, it's a little bit more subtle, I think. The seats are sportier, but it's more relaxed to sit here because you're like, and there's insulation and so on, but
right.
I mean, this truly feels like a machine directly, right?
This is definitely a lot more refined, for sure, just because of the decades of improvement and sound deadening, refinement, and so on. But I think that, you know, the seats are a little bit more. There's a bigger difference between the 3 Series and the M3 here than perhaps the original 3 Series and the original, or the original M3 and the 3 Series then, because the seats were still similar. You know, it didn't really feel also different. Here we have this gorgeous M wheel with the M buttons, these sport seats, so this is more purposeful. And also, like, I feel like I'm sitting lower in the car. The visibility is not so great. To be honest, I prefer the visibility of the old car.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, when we were talking earlier in the beginning of the episode, what should have stayed the same and what do we like that has changed? I think one thing that should have stayed the same is the visibility. You know, this is grown bulkier, you have a really high bonnet line, and then you have a shorter windshield. So I understand it's more cocooned, the A-pillars have to be bigger for crash regulations, but somehow I'm not really feeling connected with the outdoor as much. And I remember driving on the racetrack as well. I didn't like these mirrors too much because they were too big and obstructive, you know? But what I do like that has changed now is the steering, the engine. I think it's just so much more performance.
It's his favorite engine, like of all time, right?
It's one of my favorite engines, not of all time maybe, but definitely my favorite engine that you can get today. I mean, just it's instant. Like, we didn't have this kind of a reaction in the old one, did we?
Yeah. It was more like in the old one we had like the different elements, like the turning indicators, which had this classic sound, the manual shifting, of course, which can be bought for this one as well. But of course, the old one is, somehow just more special than also the clutch feedback you have there. Mm-hmm. As you said, like the sensation of speed, you know. It had more sensation in a way of the individual elements, and this here, of course, on paper, just so much sportier. You immediately feel it. This car tells you, like, you know, AJ, like, hit the throttle, like, now, do it now, and also check the speed cameras. But the original M3 was super sporty at that time, but it doesn't say, like, you know, immediately, like, hit it. It can also be like Sunday cruise as well, you know.
I think you're absolutely right. And again, this gearbox, I do not like this gearbox. And I said this when we tested the car at the launch event as well, that I think you should stick to the standard M3, get the manual transmission. You don't need that extra 30 horsepower, and it's so much more pure. And again, similar to that E30. But yeah, overall,
I like the auto gearbox, by the way. I like it. Sorry.
You
Sorry,
do?
AJ. Yeah,
Do you?
I do.
I mean, on the highway and stuff.
I'm too lazy.
You're too lazy. Well, the paddle shifters are pretty nice. They're really tall. I like the haptic feedback and the tactile feel of them. But on the racetrack, it's a bit sluggish, I think. Yeah, but my heart somehow still feels happy that this car has this extra performance, and I think I prefer this performance, and I will take this performance over the older one.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like this, you know, you need like a little acceleration boost, just slide in the throttle and it's directly there, you know. That's really the thing about the new M3 totally, man. My turn.
You know, this has a really great limited slip differential. You don't need four-wheel drive. There's so much traction coming out of a corner like that,
totally.
Even when you launch it into a corner.
You should definitely get the rear-wheel drive version of this one. And I mean, manual. I mean, you're the manual, totally manual guy. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed it with the vintage car, but here for the modern car, I would go with the automatic gearbox because it gives you more performance. Mm-hmm. Yes, I know it's less purist, it's less engaging to drive in a way, but I mean that acceleration in that perfect way, and of course, you know, when we then would even start straight and with launch control and so on, it would be even more extreme, and it's just more relaxing, and you can, you know, then use it for different situations and so on. So I would be automatic with a new one, but manual with the vintage one. Oh, there's a BMW Camo car. It's the iX. The new iX, actually. The new big SUV electric one.
Interesting.
Yeah. So also caught on camera here, freshly. So, yeah, from the exterior, I really have to say, I would get the vintage one with that angular design. I just love that angular design. Interior-wise, yeah, I like the puristic approach of the vintage one. Mm-hmm. Here, of course, you have the modern infotainment system, as you said. You know, you can do so much more things with that. And what I really like about the new interior, the refinement, like the build quality of the interior is top notch here with the new generation. That's what I prefer here. Maybe a little bit less controls. So taking something from this purist, like that, like from the gesture control, gesture control there, you know. So a little bit less controls here, and then it would be perfect to me. Yeah, and then driving wise, I mean, this is the sports machine. It's so much fun, and like, I mean, look at that slalom characteristic. I'm immediately there. That's awesome. Steering feel, I think they have worked on that now a little bit at least. Let me just see how easy I can ease it around here. That's of course also a lot of fun with the rear-wheel drive. Awesome. Like, rear came around just a little bit.
Yeah. It's that ESP and the M traction control. You have so much to play with. This also has that drift analyzer, and it really is, like, I was playing with this on a drift pad at the other event, and it's so intelligent. It makes anybody feel like they're freaking Ken Block, because it does all the hard throttle manipulation for you. Yeah. And, you know, coming back to, you know, what should have stayed the same and what we're glad has changed. One thing is, of course, I like the new interior. For me, I think this is more, I'm a millennial, I need my touch screens, but at the same time, unlike a lot of other cars and other manufacturers, there's still buttons. There's buttons for the volume, there's buttons for the climate control. Thank you, BMW. It's so much easier to manipulate and operate these systems.
Yeah, it's good that we still have them, yeah. I think steering-wise, obviously the new generation has a better steering feel than the vague one of the vintage one, but that's with all vintage cars. But still, with the 3 Series, I think they have other cars at BMWs that have a better steering feeling, and I still wonder up to this day, why have they not the best?
You love doing that, don't you, Thomas?
Before driving this one, I was so sure to pick the vintage one, but now they're really making it tough on us here today.
So Thomas, what would you? So if you could take the keys of either one home today, what would you drive home? What would you pick? You had to pick only one.
Yeah. I mean, this is such an amazing experience, and the performance is so extraordinary. I mean, clearly, the engineering job that went into this vehicle is really amazing. But I think the old one got me so hooked this time. And the design, this angular design, I think I can't withstand. I think I have to take the vintage one. And you?
Well, that's good for me because you can take that. I'm going to take this. I know the old one has character. It's a classic. It's a cult. It has its own cult following. But I think this just the performance you expect is there, and then there's so much more. Unfortunately, the performance, I know it was great for 1987, but in today's world, it's just not there. It's a cool car, but I would take this.
Okay, so we gonna talk to BMW and see if we can take both home then. Yeah, that's a deal. And of course, I want you guys to state in the comments which one would you take home, and also tune in to the Porsche Boxster episode where we did actually the same with the Porsche Boxster, taking the old model and the new model and compare it. It was also a blast. So see you there, and of course see you in the comment section.